Hello, welcome back to another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm your host, Steven Roy Goodman. Today we're going to be speaking about careers in aviation, and I'm here at Massey University in Palmerston North, New Zealand. And we're going to be talking about careers in aviation. Our first guest is the CEO of the Aviation School, Ashok Poduval. Welcome.
Thank you, Steven.
Well, maybe if you could say a word or two about why is there an aviation school in New Zealand and why is the aviation industry so important to New Zealand?
This aviation school has been established about more than 25 years ago, and it's quite an unusual school. So when you ask me why there is an aviation school, because this one is aviation education and training, not just vocational or professional aviation training. So it's a combination of both, as well as we have academic programs in aviation that lead up to a Ph.D. And why is aviation important? Because aviation is the underlying driver for tourism, and aviation contributes significantly to the economy of the country.
And you're a former pilot, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
But you're not only teaching people to be pilots, but you're also teaching people to get involved in other aspects of the aviation industry as well.
Absolutely, because pilots are not as, I can say this because I was a pilot, pilots think that they are the key people who make the industry survive, but not really. There's a lot that goes behind an airline. If there weren't passengers, the airline wouldn't fly the aircraft because they fly the aircraft to make profits. So aviation has got so many facets to it, and that's what our school does. Basically, they teach people not just to be pilots, which is one part of it, but they also prepare people for other aspects, the commercial, the sales and marketing, the network and yield and revenue management, and the whole spectrum of activities that make an airline work. Also, there's aviation encompasses airports, civil aviation authorities, ground handling agencies, and they all need people with different levels of expertise in aviation, and that's what the school does and teaches, and I think that's the importance of aviation.
Well, as a passenger, I flew here to New Zealand to do, to be here. What should I be looking for as a passenger when I book my ticket?
That's a good question. Well, the first thing I would look at as a passenger to answer that question would be, how safe is the airline? How well reputed is it? Because my primary requirement is to reach there in one piece. So that's the first thing. Then comes the customer service, and perhaps for some people the next in order might be the fare that they offer you. But the fare by itself, I think, shouldn't be a major driver, because the customer service is so poor and you don't arrive on time, or you arrive extraordinarily late and you get no facilities, that's not good. So basically it's the reputation of the airline. The safety, the customer service, and then of course, is that value for money?
So let's assume that I had a bachelor's degree in another subject and I wanted to go back to school. What would be the things that I might be able to do at your school?
The things you can do at our school, for one, is obviously the Master of Aviation, which is a professional practice pathway, not really the research pathway, because that gives them the ability to translate what they have learned in the undergraduate into an aviation perspective. The other thing they could do is come back and do a Bachelor of Aviation Management itself, which is starting at the undergraduate level for aviation management and moving on. The third thing that they could do, and we have had this is if they had an ambition to be a pilot, not be in the other aspects of aviation industry, then they could do our Bachelor of Aviation Air Transport Pilot, which actually we have had some people doing. I've had a music teacher who wanted to change careers and came in at the age of around 30, did the Bachelor of Aviation Air Transport Pilot, got a pilot's license, worked as an instructor with us for a while, and is now in an airline. So there are various things that people can do.
Well, fair enough. Thank you, Captain.
Thank you.
We're continuing our discussion about careers in aviation, and I'm here with Isaac and Sam. Sam is a flight instructor who recently completed his master's degree, and Isaac is a PhD student here. Welcome to both of you.
Hello. Okay.
Sam, if we could start with you. So why did you do a master's degree in addition to being a flight instructor?
Mainly because I wanted to have a backup to the pilot career. Firstly, I want to be a pilot. I really enjoy flying. However, as you can imagine, in flying there's a lot of medical requirements that you must maintain throughout your career. And if for whatever reason I wasn't able to meet those requirements, especially later on in my career, I wanted to have something to fall back on so I could pursue a career in somewhere in aviation management, maybe working for an airport. So that was my primary reason. And also, I wanted to learn more about the wider aviation industry as a whole, such as airport management, airline management, and all the other various jobs that make up aviation as a whole.
Well, interesting. And Isaac, so you are a Ph.D. student, so are you studying and looking at the aviation industry as a whole as well?
Yeah, so my area of interest is airport management specifically, and what I'm looking at is airport branding, because no one's looked at it before, and my suspicion, I'm only just starting, is that it's created differently to other companies. So you think of Apple or a company like that, the company and its customers form all the associations you make with it, right? With an airport, you've got the airlines that fly there, the security service, the quality of the food, all these things that are completely outside of the control of the airport company itself that are going to influence people's brand perceptions. So I'm looking at how an airport's brand is created and how we can kind of measure that performance and stuff like that. So
that's very interesting. So for instance, in New Zealand, so Auckland and Wellington could have different airport brands in your mind.
Yeah, well, it depends how you define brand. If you just treat it as the associations people make with a company, then yeah, they could have very different ones. And equally, smaller airports like Palmerston North or Hamilton are also going to have brands because people make associations with them too. So every airport has one, just a question of how it's created.
But as a passenger, would I really care about the brand, or would I care about just flying from place X to place Y?
Well, I think a lot of people do. So New Zealanders, if we want to go anywhere else, we normally have to fly through somewhere else. And a lot of people choose to go through Asia or the Middle East rather than America because the association they make with, say, somewhere like Los Angeles is, the security is much harder. Okay, so they're not actually thinking, Los Angeles is necessarily a crap airport operationally, but they don't consider it a good option just because of the associations they make with things that are outside of the airport's control.
That's interesting. But if I were the manager of the LAX airport, which is the Los Angeles airport, perhaps I don't have control of that. Perhaps the American authorities are telling me I need to do certain
that's exactly how it is, but that's why it's interesting, because you've got to classify what are the elements of the brand that are within the airport manager's control and what are the aspects that aren't. And that's basically what I'm looking at, is what are the things that create a brand in people's minds, and then we can look at actually how much control therefore airports have over it. And that makes them fundamentally different to other businesses where they have a lot more control. But
certain things are in control and certain things are out of your control.
Yeah, exactly.
So the things that are out of your control, what can you do about them?
Well, depends on what they are. So I mean, if it's government regulations, maybe you can lobby governments. I mean, airlines spend a lot of money lobbying governments for favourable sort of air service agreements and stuff like that. Airports could do the same. And there's other things where they may choose to take more control over. So at the moment, they just sort of lease out their spaces for shopping. A lot of airports don't have a particular strategy for that. It's just whoever's a good tenant and wants to go in. But maybe if you found, this is really good for brand and this is really bad for it, they might go, well, we're not going to lease our land to these people, or we're going to charge them more or something, because now we understand the interplay. So yeah, there could be areas for improvement.
Well, that was a really interesting answer about security. I hadn't really thought through it in that way. Sam, if you could say a word or two, are you studying some of this or did you study some of this in your classes?
Yeah, we did. We looked at aviation security around the world and the current trends that are happening, especially with some of the latest scanners that are available, and the whole debate between what's acceptable in terms of how much you want to analyse what's in people's luggage, their personal belongings that they're bringing on the aircraft, and what's too far. So just looking at the current debates in aviation at the moment, and the latest technologies that are being used in particular in aviation security.
And in terms of those technologies, they must be different from place to place.
Definitely, yeah, and I think you can see that around the world. If you travel to the States, for example, you might be exposed to some different technologies compared to if you travel in New Zealand. Especially regionally in New Zealand as well. In regional airports in New Zealand, we have a lot less security than some of the international airports around. So yeah, we just looked at the overall debate in airline security and in the latest technology that's being used.
And do you have an opinion on that? Do you think there should be more security, less security?
Well, it's a really interesting debate. I think that potentially in domestic travel in New Zealand there is room for a little bit more security, because at the moment it can be quite low levels of security if you're just travelling regional airport to regional airport. But international travel, I mean, there are standardised security procedures for that, so they should be relatively the same as you go to international airport to international airport. But yeah, there are just some really interesting debates, and it was quite fascinating looking at the arguments from each side.
Well, that is interesting. And before we say goodbye, if I can get back to you, Isaac, in terms of your comment about LAX airport. So what should Los Angeles do? So Los Angeles airport authorities can't have less security. If anything, there's political pressure to have more security.
Well, I mean, going back to that sort of discussion about more or less security, the thing a lot of passengers don't realise is a lot of security measures are actually quite ineffective. They're made to look effective. It's called security theatre. We put on a show. You think you're secure, but it's actually no more effective. Like, to say America's security screening is more effective than New Zealand would be lying on a statistical basis, even though ours is less stringent. But what America wants to send is a message when you go there, you know, you're going through all this stuff because we take security seriously. And so airport managers possibly have very little control over that, because the American public ultimately control who's in government, and the government control what security measures are in place. But I think maybe the United States has gone a little bit overboard on its security, and not, like, you have things like air marshals which cost a small fortune and stop very few terrorists. You know, they're very ineffective, very costly thing, and so in a sense, some of those, there's a very good case to be made for getting rid of, if that makes sense. So.
Well, that's a very provocative argument to, and I'm not in your field of aviation, but as a passenger and as an American, you know, I think it would be very difficult politically to say we should have less security. But you're saying that some of it's not really effective.
Well, it depends on why you want the security. So if you're doing it to try and prevent loss of life and things like that, right? You look at air marshals, I think it's less than 10 people they've arrested in the last 5 years, something like that. So it's quite a small number, whereas you think about if you put more funding into, say, healthcare or health and safety reform or something like that, you might save more lives doing that. So it's more just an opportunity cost. It's not to say you shouldn't put money into aviation security, it's just if a government does that, was there a better use for that money? That may have saved more lives. So it's always an interesting debate.
Fair enough. And what would you like to say to American students who might be interested in studying aviation? Do you think that it would be a good idea for them to study overseas, perhaps in New Zealand? A good idea, a bad idea?
I think it's a good idea in the sense that different countries treat different air services and market in different ways. So you look at North America and Europe, you tend to treat airlines as more as like a commodity. It's a flight from A to B. It's purely utilitarian. You come to somewhere like Asia Pacific, which has been the fastest growing area for aviation, people think of it as a service. And so if you don't travel the world and see the different perspectives, then you may be restricted in your opportunities in the industry. And New Zealand, because we're such a small country, we can teach from a very international perspective, and I think that would be a huge benefit to an American student.
From a flying perspective, I think aviation in New Zealand has some fantastic opportunities, especially in terms of training. The variation of terrain that we've got here, the weather, doing your flight training in New Zealand, you really get a sense of all the conditions that you can be exposed to, and throughout that training, all those experiences can ultimately, hopefully, enable you to make better decisions in your flying when you're exposed to those different conditions.
We're continuing our discussion about careers in aviation at Massey University with Elena and Andrew. Andrew is a flight instructor and Elena is a flight student. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
Well, thank you for coming on. Well, the first thing I notice is that you both have different color shirts.
Yeah.
Can you explain why you have different color shirts?
Well, mine's a blue shirt because I'm a flight instructor.
And I'm white shirt because I'm a student.
All right, well, Elena, you're a student, but you're from South Korea, I believe.
Yes, I am.
And you came all the way from South Korea to study in New Zealand.
Yep, to study aviation. So I came to New Zealand when I was 13. So I attended Maclean's College in Auckland. And after high school, I went to School of Aviation, Massey University.
And are you enjoying the program here?
Absolutely. That's why I applied for third-year flight instructor course to become like flight instructor like Andrew Vialoux. And yeah.
And Andrew, you've got a couple of gold bars on. What do those gold bars mean?
They just, I guess, specify the category of instructor. I think in the States it's called grades, but it's a BCAT instructor rating here. So the more seniority you have as an instructor, the more stripes you get, I guess, yeah.
And so how many students work with you, or how many students are you assisting?
At any one time, we're generally directly responsible for about 3 or 4 students. But within that, obviously, we can kind of jump around and help other students out as required with if other instructors are away or other instructors need some help with other things. So yeah, generally 3 or 4 directly, and then up to any of the other students for anything.
And can you say a word or two about what it is specifically that you're instructing about?
From the very beginning stages, from literally someone who's turned up and hasn't flown an aircraft, hasn't touched controls at all before, all the way through to the very final stages of their training in what we call an airline bridging course. So kind of converting everything they've learned in the early stages into how it would work in an airline cockpit environment.
So Elena, as a student, what specifically are you studying, and what aspects of the aviation world do you hope to be in, and what are you specifically studying now?
Well, I'm studying how to become a flight instructor, so how I can teach students. But as 2 years ago, well, I learned how to get a pilot license and commercial license up to air bridging course. Then now I'm converting to flight instructor course. So.
And if I was a new student, so you're learning to be my instructor then?
Yes, I will be. So I'll be teaching from scratch to high standard.
Wouldn't I be a little scared if I have never been flying anything before and all of a sudden I just get behind the controls?
Andrew can answer.
Yeah, for sure. and it's probably, it kind of happens throughout the training, not just at the very start as well. As you say, at the very start, never touch the controls. We kind of go through, I guess, a process that exposes the student in stages. So we're not throwing them in a plane and say, off you go, go and fly the plane for a couple of hours and come back and tell us how you did. It's a very guided process. And there's other examples, like halfway through their training, they haven't experienced some things like aerobatics before. So we start to bring that in as well, again, guiding them through that process. So it's a very, I guess, hands-on approach to teaching. The instructor's there a lot of the time, but then we also send the students out by themselves on a plane sometimes as well. So,
is there one set of controls, or are there multiple?
2 sets. Yeah,
2 sets.
Yeah. Most, or in fact all training aircraft are dual controls, so yeah.
And who owns the planes that you're testing?
The university. So Massey University owns the aircraft. They've all been painted up in a Massey University livery as well. So yeah, we've got 12 single engine and 2 twin engine aircraft.
And is there anything that either of you want to say to a future student who's thinking about doing what you're doing in terms of studying aviation? What would you like to say to them?
I guess it's definitely hard work. Something that if you're really passionate about it, then the hard work's going to come naturally. So if it is something that you're passionate about and aviation is something that you've been really interested in, then give it a go, because it's really rewarding when you come out the other side of all that hard slog to, you come out with something either like a license or you get to integrate into this industry that's so worldwide. So.
Yes, as Andrew said, as long as you do the work, it will be worth it of getting pilot license as well. And it's worldwide, it's getting bigger and bigger, so you can use it in anywhere in the world.
We're continuing our discussion about careers in aviation with Martina Daskova, who is from Slovakia, and Martina came all the way from Slovakia to New Zealand. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Well, maybe if you could say a word or two, why did you come all the way from Slovakia to New Zealand?
It's very far away, but the thing is that it's a really unique opportunity to be here. And I was granted a scholarship, which really helped me a lot, because otherwise would be maybe not really possible for me to study and to fulfill my dream, because I always wanted to be like working in aviation and psychology, but there was no chance any. And in Europe it was very hard to find something like either studying or working. So I tried to send my proposal everywhere was it possible, and I was actually accepted here, and I was very happy to, because actually the communication was very nice and straightforward with my supervisor. So he was very helpful and supportive. So we were discussing the topic and all those things, like what are the possibilities, how to support my studies as well, financially. So that was amazing, great chance.
And can you say a word or two about what is the specific overlap? So it's psychology and aviation?
Yes, it's quite unique because many people, when they think about aviation, it's like about pilots, but actually aviation psychology deals with those kind of performance limitations of people, like how do they make decisions, how do they, perceive and recognize things, and all those things which are related to safety. So we can then design and make suggestions and implications, like how to make the good policies so that the work would suit the worker, like the pilots and controllers as well.
So you're looking at the psychology of a passenger, the psychology of the industry per se, and the psychology of law enforcement as well?
No, well, psychology is very broad, but now in my studies I'm focusing on language switching. So that means, because in aviation the official language is English, but many countries they can use their local language as well. And I am studying whether for those people because then they switch between languages like English and their local language, and I'm studying whether it would not be better for them to speak just in one language or by their second language than just always switching, because that can cause some kind of additional cognitive demands and they can make more errors, and so I'm studying this.
Well, that's an interesting point. So so I could see both sides. On one hand, you want to have a uniform language, but on the other hand, if I suppose as a passenger, I would want the pilot of a plane to be concentrating on flying the plane rather than worried about what language they're speaking in.
Yeah, that's it. Like pilots who don't understand the local language, they just don't understand what they are talking about. And those pilots who can understand, they just need to switch between the languages, and it's kind of confusing. There were some kind of issues that happened, that people started to speak in an English-speaking aircraft in another language, and they just needed to repeat the transmission and all those things.
Fair enough. And so if you could make one recommendation to the aviation industry in the world about languages, what would that be?
It's too soon to make a recommendation, but according to my analysis, it looks better, maybe better in terms of speed and accuracy of performance to use just one language only. But maybe it can matter like the proficiency in English language as well, because but the point is, like in aviation they have to speak English. There are some requirements for English language proficiency, so I think this should be, it would be better to speak just one language.
We're continuing our discussion about careers in aviation with John and Anke. Welcome to both of you.
Hello.
Hi, Steve.
Well, Anke, if we could start with you. You work at the School of Aviation.
That's correct, Steve. I do, yes.
And you do. But you had some interesting views about the importance of the aviation industry in New Zealand. Why is that so important?
Well, Steve, New Zealand is so far away from the rest of the world, so really to have a very good aviation industry underpins the New Zealand economy. That's it in a nutshell, really. If we didn't have the aviation industry we have well run, well regulated, we wouldn't have the economic success that we currently enjoy.
And John, do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. People think of aviation as just the people who fly the planes and serve the drinks, but it's far more than that. And for every person who's employed in the industry, there are at least another 10 or 12 whose jobs have been created by that aviation activity, through tourism and trade and just the general business activities that support it.
And you teach here.
Yes, I do.
So what specifically do you teach?
I teach two main programs. I teach aviation or airline management, and I also teach aeronautical meteorology to the pilot students.
And so how old are your students in general?
Most of the students are between 18 and 20, but I have a lot of adult students in the management program who can be anywhere from 25 to in their late 50s. And many of them are actually currently working in the industry, and they're just studying on top of their experience.
So what would they be doing in the industry? They work at an airport and now they want to do something
A lot of them,
else?
yes. I have my current students. I have airline captains for Air New Zealand, airport managers, air traffic controllers, Air Force officers, maintenance engineers. So people from the whole breadth of the industry, and they see their qualification as an important add-on to their experience in their occupational role.
And what about international students? How do you incorporate international students into your teaching?
We actually have quite a large international role. It's one of the benefits of our program. So I'd say roughly a third of my students are internationals. We incorporate them because they can bring in their own perspectives on the industry and how it works. Through group work with other students, they introduce their own culture and ways of learning. And if you're going to work in aviation, you have to be part of the international community. So our students, for them, it makes sense to have a large international base, and it's a sort of a valuable addition to the classroom.
Well, fair enough. And Anke, if you wanted to say something to an American audience about the school here, what would you want to say?
Well, Steve, two things really. We are the only school of its kind in New Zealand, but one of the things that American students may want to know is that if they are working in the industry like John's students, they can actually study by distance learning. So they don't always need to relocate to New Zealand. They can study by distance. We're a very small school, we're a very inclusive school, and they have the opportunity here to work part-time legally 20 hours a week, so they can get industry experience or they can get work experience while they're studying full-time.
Well, thank you both very much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
If you would
Steve.
like additional information about Massey School of Aviation, please visit massey.ac.nz. If you would like to send a message to our viewer mailbox, please do so at highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. And thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. I'm Steven Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.